Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John. Behind me is my farm truck, and I'm having some issues with it. This is an 05 Ram 2500, and it has a diesel in it. And of course, the transmission that comes with it is geared for a gasoline engine. They don't put a different transmission in it when you buy a diesel. So the thing whines really, really high at, like, if you're going 70 miles an hour on the interstate. Basically, you need an overdrive, and I put an overdrive in it years ago, but I'm having problems with it. It's a Gear Vendors add-on overdrive. They're pretty common for tow vehicles like this. It definitely got my attention the other day. I was driving down the road at probably 60 miles an hour, and I engaged it, and the back wheels locked up. And luckily, before I lost control, I was able to disengage it, and it went back to driving normally. Yeah, that'll wake you up in the morning. I heard squealing, and I started kind of getting unsteady. And I wasn't quite ready for that. Never had that happen before. So then I slowed down. I was on a back road going probably 30, because you have to go at least 20 just to try to engage it. And I tried again, and it sort of engaged, and then it disengaged, and sort of engaged, disengaged. So I don't know what happened. It's possible maybe it developed a leak and all the fluid came out of it, or it's just worn out. It's probably got 130,000 miles on it. But they've been easy miles. I'm not always towing with this. A lot of times just driving. Anyway. Let's pull this into the shop and see what's going on. Here's our victim, all covered in oil. Let that sit for a little bit, we'll spray it off again, and then I'm gonna go have lunch while this thing drip dries. I'm wondering if there's something wrong with this, like if it's having an internal failure. Actually, I suspect it is. So I'm gonna use the oil to help me determine that, but first I wanna see if the oil is low. Now this is the fill plug, this is the drain plug, so let's get the fill plug out. Oh, maybe. Oh, it's got oil in there. It might be a touch low. Get out the old scope and take a look. I want to really know if that oil is low or not. So the oil, oh, is right there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's not particularly low. All right, so now I want to drain this thing, but rather than just drain it into a oil pan, I'm going to drain it into some clean yogurt containers so that I can really see what's going on with the oil. Different size. I always forget that. Why'd they do that? I mean, there's no significant metal flakes. I mean, there's a couple little streaks, but you're going to see stuff like that. That doesn't look bad to me. Doesn't mean everything's okay in there. All right, I'm going to scope this just to have a look. Yeah, again, I don't see any carnage. That's interesting. Screen there looks nice and clean. Well, so what do we do? I think what I'm going to do is put new fluid in it and give this thing some tests and just see what happens. Is it possible that maybe a clutch, there is a clutch in there. I'm not sure exactly how this thing works, but maybe it's stuck or something and just needed new fluid? Maybe. So this is Lucas gear oil, 7590, and that is what they told me to use. Started out you had to use some specialized GM stuff that was really expensive and really hard to get. You could only get from the dealer. It was really annoying. And they told me I could use AMSOIL for a little while. And I probably could still use that, but that was also expensive and kind of hard to get. So this Lucas stuff you can just order online. They said it was fine. And here's a gearbox that you're filling from the top. Good thing it's not a boat, because if it was a boat, this would never work. You'd get an air pocket in there, and it would never fill up. I guess I should explain that. There's just this this thing among boaters that you have to fill the gearbox from the bottom up. I guess the shape of a outboard motor gearbox is a little different, but I don't buy it. I fill gearboxes all the time, and the only one that is a thing is on a boat. If it's a tractor, if it's a truck, if it's a car, you fill them all from the top. Air doesn't magically like stay underneath oil. The oil's gonna drip through any air pocket, and the air pocket's gonna go to the top. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is just see if it will engage. I'm gonna let this most of the way down, keep the wheels off the ground. So right now, I'm in 4th gear. The overdrive is off, and I'm turning it on right now. There, it just engaged. And now I'm turning it off. And it just kicked out. On. Off. All right, so now I'm in 5th gear. We're going 35. It's kind of nerve-wracking because if something happened and it suddenly hit the ground, I'd go right through my garage. All right, overdrive on. And off. It's kind of a rough shift. So there I'm engaged. Going 55. Let me disengage it. 35. You know, it seems to be working. All right, I might just have to take it out for a real test drive. So yeah, I just checked my records. I last changed that oil almost a year ago, but it's only been 4,500 miles. Yeah, that oil should have been fine. I just don't see that as being the issue. Now, one thing about these things, because it's on the rear drive shaft, the front wheel drive has already come off of the drivetrain once the gear vendors is there. So the gear vendors is only going to affect the rear wheels. So if you're in 4-wheel drive and you turn that gear vendors on, the wheels would then be spinning at different speeds. And either something's going to break or your wheels are going to be skidding. Of course, it has a safety system to prevent this. But I did not have it in 4-wheel drive, but I'm kind of wondering, could it have been in 4-wheel and I didn't know? I don't think so, because it's so obvious when you're driving and you're in 4-wheel, it doesn't drive the same. I don't know. This really has me scratching my head what happened here. doing, Big Mama? She doesn't limp anymore. Here we are on a back road. I'm going 30. Let's hit the overdrive. Well, the overdrive worked fine. The camera mount did not. We're in overdrive. Let me downshift it. Yeah, and back up. What in the world did that thing do? Well, this may be a really boring video that I may never show, because all I did was change the oil and it seems to be fixed. At the same time, I'm wondering if anyone else out there has had similar experience. That was kind of unsettling. Yeah, it's working great right now. If you throttle up when you downshift and throttle down when you upshift, you don't even have to use the clutch. So here I'm going to downshift. Yeah, that worked just fine. And shift up. Again, worked fine. To try something here, because I want to make sure. So I'm going to put this thing in 4-wheel. The overdrive is off, so we are now in 4-wheel drive. Now I'm going to turn the overdrive on. Yeah, so that light didn't come on, and it should not be an overdrive, and it's not. So the lockout is working. Try that one more time. Yeah, it won't engage while it's in 4-wheel, and it shouldn't. In fact, once you put it in 4-wheel, even when you shift it out, it won't engage until you turn the truck off. So if I try it now, it's still not going to go in. Even if you turn the master switch off and back on, it still won't. Yep. Okay, so now it should work. Ah, there, it just did it again. What was that? Yeah, the back wheel's locked up. Ooh. And it just disengaged. It was like partially engaged or something. I need a new overdrive. So much for the boring video. I don't even think I had let the clutch out. Alright, I'm going 35. Now it works. See if I can reproduce it. I'm not really sure what that means. So overdrive is off. We're going into 4-wheel. Go ahead and get it up to speed. And the overdrive should not work. And it doesn't. Okay, I'm going to take it out of 4-wheel. I'm going to come to a complete stop, turn the ignition off, restart, and go again. Okay. Clutch is in, overdrive. Nothing. Worked fine. We're going to try overdrive. Clutch is in. Damn! It did it. Wheels locked up. clutch was to the floor when those wheels locked up. So I have something major mechanical wrong in that overdrive. That is the assessment. Good grief. That's no fun. I just took the trash to the dump because this thing's going to be out of commission for a while. Alright, let's get this Deathtrap off of here. So I'm assuming this shaft, which obviously is geared in here, there's another shaft coming out of the front that must just go into a splined hole in this transfer case. So I think once the U-joint is off, I can just unbolt these and pull it out, I think. Man, I'm sure it doesn't come across on camera how scary that is. I mean, your rear wheels just lock up, and of course you're in a truck that already has a light rear end. I mean, you immediately feel like your rear end's going to come around. Thank goodness, because the clutch is to the floor. The only thing you can do is disengage the drive, and thank goodness every time that has worked to free the wheels up. If it didn't, I guess you're just skidding to a stop and hopefully not getting sideways. Yikes. Anyway, enough of that. So this is just an adapter. They have different ones to fit different vehicles. I don't think there's any oil in that. This thing's leaking right there too. Yeah. I think it was time for a new one. All right, let's get to work. That should just pull out of there. I'm 99% sure that's just a spline shaft, and that would pull out. So all I need to do is unbolt it right here, because then I'll be able to take that down and pull the drive shaft off. Slide under. Look at that. That's my spline shaft. I'm going to put a little heat on that aluminum. That'll help release those for sure. Let's make sure we're loosening it instead of being an idiot. There we go. So there's 3 bolts up above here that are going to be a little harder, but I think with the heat, the thing I've learned is heat and aluminum, like when you have a steel bolt and an aluminum hole, that makes a huge difference. And that broke loose. I can move it. Oh man, what am I supposed to do there? There is no way. All right. I'm gonna find something that'll work. See that guy right there? There's no room in here to run a ratchet. So socket wrench is out, and a regular wrench also, but I might have a wrench that'll work. Let me see here. All right, how about that guy? Ooh, look at that. That goes on there. And I've got a good inch before I hit something. That's like too easy. I don't strip it out. Come on, baby. Nope. I can torque on it pretty good, but This is a bear. Tightest one is the least accessible of the bunch. Of course. Ah, man. I mean, I'm getting good torque on it now. It still won't move. All right, I'm going to take all the other bolts out because I've got all the other ones loose and see if I can get the unit to move a little bit. That might break the bolt free. All right, I think what I'm going to do is heat the bolt up and then quench it. That oftentimes, when you got steel and aluminum locked together, that will help. You got to be careful with aluminum, you can melt it. Don't really want to melt it. Just water. Got it. Hell yeah. And see, all these are bolts with a flanged head. I mean, penetrating oil is not going to get in there. It's just not. Hold. It's out. Unit is out. So seal on that side, bearing here, bearing feels good. So that's your oil intake screen, and it looks pretty clean. Don't see any problems there. So this is the speed sensor, which works on a tone ring. It sends like a signal, like a sine wave or something. It doesn't send a just like a positive negative voltage. So it's you actually have to have the truck moving and using this in order to test things out. This is the solenoid that engages and disengages the drive. I still have thoughts that maybe I'll be able to do something to fix this, but realistically, I think it's unlikely. I mean, this thing was full on locking up randomly while driving down the road. There's got to be something major mechanically wrong, unless I could find an off-the-shelf replacement part, because gear vendors won't sell me parts. I don't know if I have mentioned that yet in the video. I'm pretty perturbed with them. The only option I have is to send this back to them, and then they'll send me a remanufactured one for $1,600. That's it. No parts, and it doesn't look like, I mean, it's already an aftermarket thing. It doesn't look like there's an aftermarket company making aftermarket gear vendors parts. Assuming that's magnetic. There's no magnets on the drain plugs on this. That's the first magnet I've seen in here. So I've never had that out. And that tells me that, you know, that's just like metal paste. There's no big metal fragments. That surprises me. Why is this thing doing what it's doing? So when I pull that out, the pickups are right here, running right against this gear. So that basically is your tone ring. What that means is every time a tooth Every time a tooth passes the pickups, it's going to produce an induced current and make a current in the sensor. And then when there's no tooth, the current goes back down, so you get this up-down, rhythmic pattern. The frequency that the computer receives is what tells it how fast it's going. If you just try to put voltage to it, it won't see it as a speed. Everything feels good, all the bearings are tight. Why is this thing a Deathtrap? So I don't know what this cover plate is for, but it looks easy enough to take off, so let's pop that off of there. Now this was facing up in the install, so it's basically totally inaccessible. Okay, there's a snap ring there that I'd be able to reach. Maybe it must be for disassembly. That's a snap ring right there. I assume for removing this shaft. Yeah, what do you bet I gotta get that snap ring first. Reach down in here and get this snap ring. I can barely see it once I put the pliers in. Snap ring pliers are actually too long in that dimension to fit down in that little hole. And trying a smaller pair, well, let's just say I've been here a while and being creative, but I think I just got the snap ring up and over the lip, so I should be able to go around it now, hopefully, and pry it out. As I bring it around, it doesn't want to come out. So I'll keep fighting with it. There it goes. Don't speak too soon, John. When will you learn? This is a 90-degree pick that I've got up under it, so I can lift it up as I go around. But it's requiring a lot of force. The pick might break. Come on, baby. She's out. She's out. Did I accomplish anything? So this thing actually has an internal hydraulic pump. It uses hydraulic pressure to engage and disengage. You can see it's cammed. That's going to be running a piston up and down as it spins to generate hydraulic pressure. Here you can actually see it. So this thing was in here like this. As it spins, look at that. That's going up and down, and this is acting as a pump. Kind of cool. And maybe those have to come off. Maybe that's why it won't separate. Now we're into it. Bearing feels good. This is the clutch. It's an oil bath clutch, obviously. Yeah, this wouldn't come out, I don't think, without removing that snap ring. What's going on with this thing? Everything in here looks good. There's your planetary gear set. No play on any of them. This thing, it looks like it has some wear on it to me. It looks like It's like a ratchet mechanism, and I think it goes into this roller bearing here and would only allow it to spin one way, maybe. Go back in there. Yeah, that will only spin one way. Now, why this thing was a death trap, that's going to take some further investigating, and so far I have not found much to really explain that. That has a little play on it, but I doubt that matters. I'm going to look at that later. I want to try to get this apart, but these things get challenging. Sometimes it's just not so obvious how to get it apart. From this end, there's nothing I can do. There's a bearing there. There's a thin cover here that looks like it was just pressed in, but this is where that snap ring is. So that snap ring would have been preventing this shaft from going that way. It was in a groove and then up against this bearing here. So I'm thinking, and I might be wrong, I probably am, that if I drive that down, now that the snap ring's not engaged, it should go down. Hit that pretty hard and it didn't do anything. I really wish I could get in there and see what's wrong with it. I mean, I've already kind of accepted it's not something I'm going to be able to fix. I mean, this is just too important for me to be doing a goofy farmer fix. I don't want a death trap when I'm going down the road like it is now. I want this thing to work and be safe. So, I think this thing is press fit together, and getting it apart, I'm afraid I'm going to break something and then I won't get my core, which if I remember right, I think they said was $400. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to discover anything in here, because I can see, you know, we've got solid shaft here. I can see this this tone ring, this gear that acted as the tone ring for the speed sensor. It looks fine, and it spins okay, but there is a little bit of roughness to it. I don't know if that comes across on camera, but I can feel and hear a little bit. Little crunchy, but again, nothing that would explain this thing locking up. I don't get that at all. Let's have a look at this planetary gear set. Yeah, there's really nothing else to see here either. These are pressed in. There's a little cage right here that probably pop off to press them back out. Or just go ahead and press it through, but there's no significant play on them. There's no missing teeth. There's nothing that would explain it locking up. So this to me seems like the thing that has the most wear on it, but it's hard for me to really say because I've never seen a new one. So I got a red mark right across the top there and right across the top here. Now this is the input shaft. This is coming out of the transfer case actually, but just think of this as out of the transmission. And the clutch is pushed all the way this way, which means actually the clutch isn't doing anything. It's just allowing the power to pass through. So like this, it's 1-to-1. So I'm back at the top, I'm back at the top. So this is no overdrive. This is with the unit off. Now, when the solenoid engages, remember there's springs here that keep it, so its default position is disengaged. When the solenoid engages, it puts hydraulic fluid to pull the clutch this way, which this has clutch material on it, is going to lock it against this, because this is on here like that. So that clutch is going to come here and be held in a rigid position. And that means that now the planetaries are going to be what's transmitting the power through. So now when I spin this, remember this is an overdrive, so this spins faster than this. so that the wheels turn faster at the same engine RPM. So now let's go one turn around. So I went one turn here, and you can see there I'm a turn and a quarter. I'll do that again, and we'll watch. So there I'm back at the top on the output shaft. You guys can see that. And now I've done 2 turns on the input shaft, and this is probably pointing down. So let's go again. So 3 turns, and I'm almost back to the top on the output. So 4 turns will bring that around again, and a little bit. So you can see for every 4 turns of this, I get 5 and almost a quarter turns of that. So that's the overdrive. So the output shaft is spinning faster than the input shaft. And then if I disengage, you can see where they are. They're both roughly up. They're not in line, but if I disengage and let the clutch now go there, and I'm no longer using the planetaries, then they're going to stay in the same orientation. Okay, it took me a little while to figure out how this thing works, but I think I've got it now, so I'm going to kind of edit and piece this together, but you'll get the gist. We've already looked at, here's the pump going up and down, being driven by this lobe on the input shaft. So as coming out of the transfer case, this is spinning. That is driving this piston up and down and pumping fluid and generating pressure. Let me flip that guy around. The solenoid is right here, and when the solenoid is not engaged, the oil comes out here, which then just goes right back into the oil reservoir, and I'm sure it's going other places just to lubricate things. Like there's a pathway, I think, up into this, which goes here on the input shaft and then comes out the end, so it's sending oil around the unit, keeping it lubricated. When you throw the solenoid, it sends high pressure fluid up into this gallery behind here, and that's what engages the clutch. On the other side of those 2 bosses there are these, which that's basically a little hydraulic piston. See, there's an O-ring to seal it, and it just has tight tolerances, and when it gets high pressure behind it, it's going to drive it this way. Well, what does that accomplish? Well, that is hooked to our clutch assembly. So here's the clutch. It's got a clutch disc on the outside there, and also one on the inside there. But we'll look at this more in just a second. But when I put that in, these are bolted onto it. When this piston right here pushes, and this one that will be right there, so when those pistons push, it's pulling on these bolts. Well, that's the clutch. So it's spring-loaded to go this way, but when you put pressure to those pistons, it pulls it this way and overcomes the spring pressure. So the clutch goes from using the inside disc, which you'll see mates with this guy here, to locking against the case on the outside, and that forces it to use the planets. Let's look at that a little bit more. But now you understand the basics of how it engages and disengages the clutch. All right, so this is the basic setup. This is the input shaft. This is coming out of the transfer case, out of the transmission. That's going to the drive shaft and the rear wheels. So the input shaft, this is a solid shaft to this point, but it doesn't go all the way through, obviously. Now, the output shaft, this is a solid piece, or at least it's pressed together. So what determines the output shaft's rotational speed is whatever is driving this ring gear here. And the clutch, remember, toggles between mating on this surface here or being locked to the case. So something to note here, this is the clutch here. It is fixed with this gear here, which actually has a little bit of slop in it. And that may be one of our problems, but whatever the clutch is doing, this is doing. So when the clutch is in default position, spring-loaded here, locked to the output shaft, then this is spinning at the same speed as the output shaft. When the clutch is this position, locked against the case, well, this is stationary against the case. And that is what determines what's going on with the planetary gear set. This is in the middle, and this is called a sprag gear. It's basically a one-way gear that operates on this bearing back here. Now, I haven't been able to determine exactly why that's necessary, but I can tell you that you can't operate this thing in reverse. That's part of why it locks you out until you're going 20 miles an hour forward. If you engage the overdrive in reverse, it'll mess this up. So when we're in disengaged position, this is locked with the output shaft. The whole thing is going to turn as a unit. It's not here because, as I'm showing you, it would be locked against this face and forcing that to spin, if that makes sense. But when disengaged, it's going to turn like this. Alright, so we have a spline shaft that locks with the internal of the planetary gear, or the gear assembly, so that that now spins as a unit. Basically, this is fixed to that. When it's disengaged, this is fixed, so that is driving the planetary gear at a certain RPM, and this clutch is spring-loaded against this face, so that essentially is fixed to that, which is our output shaft. And that basically means the entire thing is going to spin at the same RPM. Now, when you take the clutch off of there and you hold the clutch in a fixed position against the case, now something different's happening, but you can't see it because it's in the way. But now the planets are spinning, and so I'm going to put this on the other side so you can see that. So there, when we were unlocked, everything wanted to spin as a unit because it was locked together with the internal clutch on this output shaft. And you can see the planets are stationary. They don't move when everything's locked together. But now, if you take this clutch and you lock it to the case, remember that locks that internal bevel gear to the case, so the planets have to spin. So you can see they are now turning. And that is a different gear ratio. So that's where your overdrive is coming from. So now the planets are driving the ring gear, which drives the output shaft. So that's what you're toggling between. It's either being driven by the clutch as a one-to-one input-output, or it's being driven by the planetary gears on the ring gear, which is a 22% reduction. So there you go. That's how it works. Now, why is mine locking up? I don't have a definite answer, but this is what I can tell you. Somewhere between the clutch and the final output shaft, it's jamming up. Now, what would cause that? Well, there's a fair amount of play right there in that bearing. So that's one possibility. Something that I'm suspicious of, down in here, right along this bearing here, it looks a little chewed up and the edges are quite sharp. So it's definitely been wearing there. Now that would be where, you see that thing goes down in there and mates with that bearing, and if that jams up, I'm not sure about that, but I think that's a possibility. That's where I see the most wear, and the sharp edges really make me suspicious. The other thing is, this thing has a lot of play on it. And I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. And this does go into a pilot bearing there, a bushing, But this thing has a lot of play on it. I doubt a new one would move that much. And, you know, this thing is floating. This planetary gear set moves back and forth with the clutch. When the clutch goes out, it goes out. And when the clutch goes in, it may or may not go in, actually. I guess it would depend on the direction of force, because these things generate some axial force when they're spinning. So at times I think this would be either driven that way or it would be driven back this way. And in some position it's jamming up and locking up my drive shaft, which is not very cool. The other thing is this input shaft is kind of crunchy. It's kind of tight. And there's a fair amount of play in that. And I can see where there's some galling on the end of this, where this goes into that pilot bearing there, which is just a bronze bushing. So, and when I put it in the bushing, yeah, there's quite a bit of play there too. So I think it's just a matter of, there's a lot of wear points here. Things are moving around, and in a certain configuration, it locks up when you engage the overdrive. And of course the clutch locks against the case here. So if anything beyond that jams up, well, it's going to jam up the whole overdrive. And I'm sure that's what's happening. There's one more thing, and that is right here. It looks like there's a little spring retainer, and it's missing from here to here. So that may have broken off. I didn't find any metal bits in here, but I also wasn't able to get this apart. So it could be hiding in one of the bearings down in there, and that certainly would be implicated. It's also possible that it came out a long time ago. I didn't notice it on an oil change, but it damaged one of the bearings, and you know, it's causing problems there. So there's a lot of potential wear points in here. There's a lot of play in things, and it's jamming up. I can't tell you exactly how, but I'm not putting it back on my truck like that. So I'm going to get a new one. I don't like it because it's going to be expensive for a new one. A rebuilt one is going to end up costing me about $2 grand. But what are you going to do? The truck is... Dodge really should have geared it differently when it had a diesel, because it's just geared way too low. If you try to go on a 70-mile-an-hour interstate with this thing, it is revving like crazy. So it's just really obnoxious to drive, and I plan on keeping this truck for a while. So, yep, got to do it. Well, wouldn't you know it? 5 weeks to get the rebuilt one. So I can't go 5 weeks without a truck. So I'm going to put this back on. I'm not even going to hook up the wires to the solenoid. So it's just going to be a pass-through. Basically, it's going to allow me to hook the engine to my rear wheels so I can use the darn truck. Let's get it back on there. And if you're worried, those are timed the same way that they were. I had to go back and look at the footage because I forgot to mark it. I don't think that joint actually matters. The U-joints certainly matter, but between that and the differential, I don't think it would matter. But anyway, it's the same way that it was. For those of you wondering, drive shafts are balanced so that they don't wobble around because they're spinning at a very high rate. See, that's a balancing weight right there. If you put them together wrong, you'll get shimmies and wobbles, and you'll know it. All right. Not hooking the wires up. That's how it's going to run for the next 5 weeks until I get the replacement. And we'll throw that in there. All right. Yeah, so this is a little speedometer cable that is going to work along with the new speed sensor. Slightly different than the old one. I'm tempted to open this thing up and see if I can see a difference But I can tell you already, it's just way tighter. I think my problem was all the slop in that other one. Just too much. Apparently that part that was still on there is also part of the adapter, so I gotta take that off the old one and put it on this. Yeah, if I go pulling this thing apart, I'll end up with leaks on these gaskets, and yeah, I just don't want to fool with that. I think that, the real answer is going to be if I put it on there and it doesn't ever do it again, well, then we know it was in that old gear vendor's. If it does, I'm going to be experiencing a lot of pain. That said, these things don't last forever. In my opinion, they're the best aftermarket overdrive out there, and I have to say it's very well built. All that being said, it only has 140,000 miles on it. The transmission on the truck's not worn out. Why is this? I don't quite understand that. Why are they not able to make an overdrive that can last just as long as the transmission does? Yeah, I don't know. There are few options when it comes to something like this, and I think this is the best one that's available. I wish it was a little better, but what can you do? Click.
Alright, now just gotta get this thing filled up.
Now we need to look at hooking up the new speed sensor, and the solenoid's easy. Go ahead and do that right now. I wish those were a little tighter. I'm going to grab a pair of pliers and tighten those up. You know what? I think I'm going to do the speed sensor first. This is a little speedometer cable. So then that is going to hook to this, which this generates the signal that the control unit can see and understand. Now I need to figure out where I'm going to mount this. I capped the end with one of my hydraulic plugs. It fits perfectly. And there's a place right here where it's kind of up against a little bracket there, and plenty of places to zip tie. So I'm just going to kind of hang it there. I think that'll be fine. This is up and out of the way, and shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, that's a lot better. All right, that should do it. I've got another thing I need to do in the control board because we've changed the speed sensor, but I'm going to do that tomorrow. It's quitting time. So since they redesigned the speed sensor, I have to change something on the control board, which is mounted right behind that. That's it right there. So there's a jumper in here that I need to remove or cut. Unfortunately, they didn't send the instructions. I have to call them and they're not open right now. So, gonna have to wait. That's annoying. Just tell me what to do. I suspect it's gonna be like removing either this, or, you know, these. Those are just jumping some pins. Like those are not jumped and those are. Those aren't. Just have to know how to set this control board up so that it knows what speed sensor it's going to be receiving. That's it. If I could do that, I'd be ready to drive it, but I gotta wait. Hate waiting. And I'm jealous of you guys because you don't have to wait. Okay, so in order to reconfigure, I need to remove this jumper here on J12. That's it. Put this back together and we'll go test this thing out. I took it for a test drive and the verdict is, I don't know. I'll level with you guys. I'm not feeling great about this repair. It did work fine. It has not done it since. I don't feel like I was able to adequately explain what was going on with what I found. Yeah, there was some wear in the thing. It's got 130 some thousand miles on it. It's going to have some wear in it. But is that enough to make it lock up? I mean, I was expecting to get in there and find some gears with broken teeth so that the gears were coming together tooth on tooth and that was stopping it. But I didn't find anything like that. I didn't even find any metal filings in the oil. To think that that tiny little circlip breaking off could have gotten a bearing and locked it up, I don't think so. It would just smash it. So I'm kind of perplexed on this one. The other thing that I was thinking about is, could the transfer case be involved? Could the truck be like partially in four-wheel? But I mean, you can tell when a truck is in four-wheel and it's not. I don't know. So that's kind of where I am on this. Obviously, I drove it a good bit and I tested it a good bit and it did work. But it just doesn't sit right with me. So I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Comment below. If something major comes in the future, I will certainly let you guys know. I'm not sorry I did it. This thing was going to need to be replaced sooner rather than later anyway. Since I was having problems, let's just do it now and see if it fixes the problem. So far, it seems to. All that said, other than paying the darn bill, I had a lot of fun doing this. I've always been kind of curious exactly how that thing worked, and taking it apart and seeing how it was built was really cool. So I hope you guys learned something. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Hit that like button and let me know what you think down in the comments. Did I get this right? Did I miss something? See you on the next one.